And thank you for joining me for this new edition of Business Africa. This week on the show, we explore Europe's demands for transparency in mineral exploitation and follow the latest news on free trade on the continent. But first, here are the main highlights. Transparency in gold mining, a promise of economic prosperity. This is what African mineral experts are advocating.
That would enable us to have mechanisms or tools to force multinationals to respect human rights, or at least to make the entire value chain involved in extracting critical or strategic minerals accountable.
Almost 10 years of existence and 10,000 tons of recycled electronic waste, we put the spotlight on Weee, one of Kenya's new champions of the circular economy.
To date, we have done over 10,000 tons of e-waste that we've properly disposed. So that's to save the planet over 14,400 tons of CO2. We've served over, 8,000 different customers across Africa.
Unemployed young Beninese convert to organic farming and meet strong demand from consumers in search of healthy produce.
Ecological and organic agriculture is not the best option for many, and there are very few farmers who invest in this sector. Even at the level of public authorities, efforts to increase this type of agriculture are lacking.
Tin, tungsten, tantalum and gold, minerals essential to Africa's prosperity. They are known as the 3TG, and the European Parliament is currently looking into an audit of the functioning of a supply regulation for these four minerals, which came into effect 6 years ago. But at the same time, a group of 20 NGOs are warning that the regulation is failing to achieve its key objectives, to break the link between mining and the financing of conflict, while at the same time making progress on human rights. What do African experts think? Our correspondent Sayon Kouma asked them about the gold issue. Take a look.
In 2021, the European Union introduced an ambitious regulation to ensure that minerals such as gold do not finance armed conflict. The directive seeks to promote responsible sourcing of these essential metals in the electronics and aerospace sectors, as well as in the energy transition. This audit is of crucial importance for the continent, in particular for countries of West Africa, which rank third in the world in terms of gold-rich land. It is therefore imperative that the continent's natural resources contribute to sustainable development rather than conflict.
Tous ces pays africains qui sont en conflit.
There are gold fields in all these African countries that are in conflict, so controlling this relationship between these enormous amounts of money and conflict is essential.
D'argent et les guerres et les conflits. Aujourd'hui, c'est un problème clé.
Today it's a key issue. Gold is an important commodity because it's a valuable, safe place.
C'est important de contrôler cet or-là.
Controlling this gold is vital so it doesn't become a funding source for conflicts. I'm glad the European Union has taken this decision. I hope they will go all the way and succeed in controlling this trade.
In 2019, Crisis Group raised the alarm. The international organization revealed that armed groups, including jihadists, were using gold mines in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger as a funding source. Gold-related revenues for armed groups are estimated to have increased by 25 to 40% in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Experts point out more of Africa's gold zones are affected by conflict.
I'll ask the European Union to help the countries where these minerals are extracted to work on their traceability. Where do these minerals come from? Who are the actors behind the exploitation of these minerals? And to ensure that these minerals come from non-conflict zones, areas with no difficulties, and that all the communities where these operations occur benefit from them. That's what's important here.
More recently, in October 2023, 20 non-governmental organizations called on the European Union to strengthen its regulations, notably by requiring importers to guarantee the traceability of minerals back to the mines of origin and to impose sanctions in the event of repeated non-compliance. At a time when over 10 million people work illegally in the artisanal mining field in Africa, shifting this sector towards the formal economy of producing countries is a key challenge to improving transparency in the industry.
The artisanal sector remains quite challenging to assess because it's difficult to track the production of the craft sector. So what needs to be done to bring transparency in this field? There are complications, and in most of these countries, the system for monitoring these mining projects could be more effective and needs to be revised. That's where the problems are.
Europeans auditing can help strengthen governance in Africa and promote a more sustainable energy transition. But it is also up to Africa to carefully monitor how this guidance is implemented on the continent, making sure that its precious resources contribute to sustainable development and are not used as a source of funding conflicts.
The audit is part of the process the European Union has been implementing over the last few years. This process examines all supply chains, not just for gold, but also for transition minerals. The aim is to ensure social, environmental, and governance accountability. This audit fits into that framework, so for me it's a very good thing.
Donc pour moi c'est une très bonne chose. Les recommandations.
The recommendations of this due diligence will help improve the governance process locally and internationally.
Et à l'échelle également internationale.
Africa is a major contributor to mineral production, and this audit can influence the way the continent manages its natural resources. These regulations can also promote sustainable practices throughout the global supply chain and help advance human rights.
Well, as a promoter of human rights and responsible mining, I think it's an excellent idea for companies to be more conscientious. That would enable us to have mechanisms or tools to force multinationals to respect human rights, or at least to make the entire value chain involved in extracting critical or strategic minerals accountable.
In the experts' view, the continent needs to show its commitment to transparency and accountability in the use of these resources, strengthen the confidence of international investors, and promote sustainable development. In particular, this will require reforms to modernize the mining sector and integrate the artisanal sector, a major provider of employment for millions of people in Africa.
And to understand the situation in which many of Africa's mining-producing countries find themselves, I'm joined by Lotte Hoeks, a researcher at the independent institute IPIS, a specialist in the continent's mining sector. Lotte Hoeks, hello and welcome to Business Africa. First of all, an interesting observation: very few African governments seem to be aware of the requirements of the European regulation on 3TG supply. How do you explain it?
And according to me, there are two main reasons that explain this lack of knowledge. First reason is that there has never been a real attempt by the European Union to inform producing countries or the relevant government bodies in the producing countries on this upcoming regulation. Secondly, it's because what we have seen is that there's the level of transparency that has been asked by EU companies is quite low. So at this moment in time, it's still very difficult to know where a mineral at the EU market is coming from, what the country of origin is. And because of this lack of transparency, it's actually quite difficult to cascade the obligations down to the producing countries.
So what should the administration of the concerned African countries do?
Well, I think the good thing of this EU regulation is that it did not reinvent the wheel. It did not come up with its own set of rules. It incorporated an internationally recognized standard, which is the OECD due diligence guidance. Mining administration in 3TG producing countries should respect and implement this OECD due diligence guidance. And in practice, very concretely, this means the respect of human rights at the production, so the exploitation and trade level. Also labor rights, for example, but also very important in this law is the link with conflict. So no involvement of armed groups or government army in the exploitation or the trade of these 4 minerals.
And how can they better target the artisanal and small-scale mining sectors whose production is very difficult to control?
Obviously, it's an important sector, giving a very important workforce, very important for the economy in producing countries. So it's not a sector that can be excluded by these new rules. And the OECD due diligence guidance is very clear on that companies should not avoid sourcing, so buying their minerals from either a conflict-affected area, but also not from the artisanal and small-scale sector. However, at the same time, it also means that that the mining administration has still quite some work to do in terms of formalizing this artisanal and small-scale mining sector, so that it is ready for these more stricter rules in terms of the respect of human rights. Another element is transparency. It's important that there's a level of transparency, that it's clear what the circumstances were of the mining, but also where the minerals are coming from within the country, from which mining area, what are the circumstances in that mining area. Because if this is all very untransparent and unknown, a company often prefers not to take the risk to source from that area, because it does not know what possible risk it is not respecting, or possible human rights it's not respecting there.
Lotte Hoyts, thank you very much. Well, as you know, the next United Nations Climate Conference, COP28, will be held in Dubai at the end of this month. In the run-up to this meeting, a major development took place a few days ago with the signature of a compromise. This is an agreement on a future fund to cover climate loss and damage in vulnerable countries. Negotiators welcomed this decisive step forward, but many climate actors criticized the absence of a financing plan and the refusal of developed countries to endorse the principle of mandatory contributions to the future fund. And we remain on the environmental theme and turn our attention to another problem, that of electronic waste. This represents millions of tons, and the situation is particularly worrying in Africa. Countries like Nigeria and Ghana are struggling to cope with imports of second-hand electronic equipment, 25% of which is already unusable on arrival. In Kenya, only 10% of electronic waste is recycled. In Nairobi, our journalist Jefferson Kahinu visited a social enterprise specialized in the circular economy. The aim is to give new life to used equipment and collect precious materials. Take a look.
Kenya is estimated to generate over 50 tons of e-waste annually, and only 1% of it is properly recycled. The pandemic saw more people working from home, increasing imports of electronics, both new and second-hand. Albeit, e-waste management remains a big headache for the country.
So when you have a huge appetite for consuming electronics, there's also equivalent electronic waste that will be disposed.
The carbon footprint of electronics is estimated to be about 3.7% of global greenhouse emissions. Recycling e-waste from landfill reduces methane emissions, which are 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide.
To date, we have done over 10,000 tons of e-waste that we've properly disposed. So that's to save the planet over 14,400 tons of CO2. We've served over, I think, 8,000 different customers across Africa, whereby we are providing them a very safe alternative to existing traditional ways of disposing electronic waste.
The long-term management of e-waste requires companies to have extended producer responsibility to manage the growing number of waste.
But there's still a mindset issue, you know. People don't understand how bad it is. The same way you have people who don't understand how bad climate change is for the planet.
Africa has been used to dump e-waste from other international countries, but some countries, like Kenya, have set up legislation to stop it. Not many African countries have the mechanism of recycling e-waste due to the high cost of machinery required to start similar projects.
We still have countries in Africa who don't have a solution. But where will they take the e-waste? But as a company, we've been establishing partnerships with other African countries. We've set up, or rather we have footprint in more than 15 countries in the continent, whereby we're also building their capacities as we center grows and expands. So some of these countries we have direct operations, other countries we have set up partnerships with players in those countries.
More efforts are needed after the East African Community, EAC, unanimously decided to prohibit the dumping of e-waste in the region in 2021.
We're largely importers, which means we don't dictate the standards of technological equipment that is coming into our countries, which means we have higher waste because the life cycles of these products are shorter. So whereas maybe in the West you'd have a product serving or reaching its end of life after 20 years, here it's taking maybe 5-7 years or even less in some instances. And that generates and exacerbates the amount of waste creation.
Importers and dealers of electronic devices will be liable for treating the e-waste generated, the EAC ruled. This will take the prices north, with most imports coming from Australia, Japan, China, and Canada.
Achieving circularity with e-waste is possible. The challenge we have in Africa, which Kenya is also, one of the countries in Africa, is that we don't control a lot of production systems that are producing a lot of our equipment. Be it the cars we are driving, be it the television sets we are watching, be it the washing machines we are using, the mobile phones we are using are not even within our control in terms of actual manufacture. And so the challenge lies here. Even with extraction or recovery of useful material from e-waste, we still have to export it to the countries that are producing this equipment for us. Whereas, if we had production lines in country, we'd actually be able to consume that material locally, circulate it back into the system, and require very little virgin material that is needed to top up based on whatever losses we'd have made in terms of the recycling process. But the challenge is we are not in control of our production systems.
Even though e-waste is hazardous and harmful, there are a few situations where it has helped Africa by creating jobs. Currently, Africa's informal e-waste recycling and collection industry brings in between 22 cents and $9 per person per day.
Welcome back to the second part of our show. What's the future of the AGOA? The Joburg Forum on Free Trade Agreements between the United States and sub-Saharan African countries concluded with a unanimous call from 35 qualified African countries to renew the scheme created in the years 2000. The agreements expire in September 2025, and most African states are calling for a 10-year extension and less stringent eligibility criteria. US President Joe Biden has come out in favor of the extension, calling on Congress to act before the agreement expires. But he also withdrew 4 countries from the scheme for failing to meet the eligibility criteria. The countries are Uganda, the Central African Republic, Gabon, and Niger. And the continent is tirelessly pursuing its own trade liberalization efforts. Most recently, a forum was held in Accra to discuss the future of commodities markets. The aim is to establish a new association of African Commodities Exchange, the AACX. The objective is to set up a common mechanism for intra-African trading on these markets based on the rules of the African Continental Free Trade Area, the AfCFTA, which came into force in 2021. The chairman of the commodities exchanges of Zimbabwe, Ghana, Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, and Tanzania have been appointed to the steering committee of the new association. In Nigeria, infrastructure conditions and insufficient investment in the oil sector are leading to a paradox. The Nigerian state oil company, Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, will have to import 110,000 barrels of crude oil from Saudi Arabia and Venezuela to operate the Kaduna refinery due to reopening next year after a long period of renovation. Nigeria currently produces 113 million barrels less than its OPEC quota. This represents a loss of almost $9 billion over the first 7 months of the year. The farmer entrepreneur trend continues to gain momentum in Africa and is quickly expanding to include organic produce. Benin is one of the countries leading the way with the Songhai Organic Farm, founded in Porto Novo in 1985 and named a Center of Excellence for Agriculture by the United Nations. More than 35 years later, unemployed young Beninese are continuing this model of entrepreneurship by organizing themselves into associations. Our correspondent Didier Salba followed the young entrepreneurs of the Jardin de l'Espoir Association and the Farmers Market they set up, much to the joy of consumers. Take a look.
We are here at the Minotin market, located at the heart of Cotonou in Benin. At first glance, it is difficult to separate organic products from conventional ones. Chemical pesticides used in the cultivation are tricky to be detected by consumers. Despite their absence, it does not make the lives of these organic farmers easier, who usually face other challenges such as pests, diseases, and weeds. Organic is seen as an unattractive form of cultivation in developing countries. Very large-scale cash crops seem to many farmers to be the only way of attracting foreign exchanges. This explains why very few farmers choose organic. Based in Torre Bazito, about an hour's drive from the economic capital Cotonou for more than 5 years, Femi Kotchoni is one of them. He practices organic farming on an area of 3,000 square meters, and his main concern is the promotion of his organic products.
Ecological and organic agriculture is not the best option for many, and there are very few farmers who invest in this sector. Even at the level of public authorities, efforts to increase this type of agriculture are lacking. But there is also the question of the market.
At the market, organic products are sold at the same price as conventional ones. To be sure of what they are consuming, buyers of organic produce look for and identify gardens that practice this form of agriculture. This is the case of Merveille Nanukon, a young hairdresser living in Pidjose, Cotonou. She doesn't hesitate to drive across town to stock up on organic vegetables at the farm Ousmane's Garden of Hope.
La plupart du temps, moi, je prends les légumes.
Most of the time I buy the vegetables, and as you can see, compared to chemicals, organic products are the best.
Les produits bio sont les meilleurs, puisque ça prend du temps à se détériorer.
Since their lifespan is longer, it remains good to eat for a longer period of time. And the taste also differs, so I like to consume organic. It's above all to meet this growing demand that Femi Kotchoni and his friends launched in August 2021 the Farmers Market, a bi-monthly 100% organic market that they finance themselves. 7 gardeners manage this market, which welcomes 100 customers. These organic products are sold at a higher price than in conventional agricultural markets to ensure a decent income for organic farmers.
Faisons tout
We do all we can to ensure that the farmer receives a fair price. Our goal, of course, is to reverse the current trend within 3 years. So 70% in the farmer's market and 30% in a normal market.
The farmers' market is the only initiative where you can find certified organic products in Benin. The duplication of this initiative in the rest of the country could favour farmers to invest in organic and also seek to transmit their cultivation techniques.
Our customers recognise the value of our vegetables. In organic, you don't say, you need the money to buy some chemicals, you just need to use your hands. I believe that to produce it is even easier than using chemicals. For example, I don't need to pay for insecticide. We use neem leaves, which we have on the farm for the treatment, also papaya leaves, Vernonia grape leaves. I take them all, pile them up and soak them in water. They soak for several days, and then I drain and filter them and I make my treatment with it. We don't kill the insects, we just keep them away. With neem and papaya leaves, if flying insects, worms and so on try to eat the leaves, they won't like the taste. The products that we use will change the taste of the leaves. It's bitter or spicy. We do our own composting. We take dead leaves and dry leaves and we mix them with cow dung and droppings and charcoal waste. That's how we fertilize the soil.
A traditional know-how which is quickly coming back to life and which could give Africa a real edge, and above all the ability to build up a new reservoir of organic products. According to a study by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the FAO, in 2017, Africa has almost 60% of the world's uncultivated land.
Africa is a continent that's developing, and it's the only continent today where there's the possibility of enjoying natural produce, because the African farmer doesn't have the means to use lots of chemicals and cannot afford the heavy machinery to spread such products all over his soil. He can't afford to produce 2,000 hectares on his own. We still have natural seeds in Africa, and they are threatened, so now is the time to realise they must be saved. We must create granaries of natural seeds in the face of manipulated seeds, which have been transformed, seeds whose genes have been modified and which, once planted, become a threat to the environment and to the health of consumers.
For Femi and his friends, their market has in any case already won its awareness bet.
It's been a very successful initiative. We launched it to provide healthy fruits and vegetables free of pesticides and chemical fertilizer residue to consumers. We did not want it just for the well-off, we wanted it for the entire population. And looking at the mix of customers who've come here, I can say for this, our second edition, we have reached our goal.
The roadmap has already been drawn, duplicating organic markets throughout Benin before extending them to the entire sub-region with a central target to become the leader in the distribution of agro-ecological products throughout West Africa. The region still only accounts for 17% of organic cultivated areas on the continent. But the trend is towards an increase in local initiatives, with already good export figures for some products such as organic pineapple from Benin or soya from Togo.
Well, that's it for today. Business Africa is over. I'll be back next week, same time, same channel, for a new episode of Initiative Africa. I'll be hosting Marc Levean, Emeritus Director of Research at France's CNRS, the National Research Center for Scientific Research, and a leading expert on Sudan. In the meantime, you can watch the show again on our website, africanair.com, and follow us on our social networks. Feel free to share, like, and comment using the hashtag BusinessAfrica. Have a great week, everyone, and until next time, goodbye.